All right, guys, tonight kicks off the official start of the 2023 NFL preseason. And with all the festivities going on surrounding the Hall of Fame game, it's also going to kick off one of the more volatile information seasons for us here in the fantasy football community. Over the next month or so, we'll have so much information just being spewed at us from training camp reports, roster cuts, preseason games, and obviously the dreaded injury reports that inevitably come down the pipe as well. So throughout all that, we're going to keep you updated of the players you should be making notes of, the information that is kind of BS and the information that to pay attention to, but we're also going to continue to give you our official rankings for the 2023 redraft season. We wrapped up wide receivers earlier in the week, and now we're moving on to the running back position, one of the more hotly contested positions for the 2023 season. So as always, like the video, comment down below what you think of our own personal running back rankings, subscribe to the channel if you are new here, and I'll go ahead and cue that intro. Welcome back into Twin Takes Fantasy Football. We wrapped up our wide receiver rankings, which was a lot of fun to do. I'm sure we got a lot of feedback on that, some hot takes there, but this one is going to be even more fun to dive into. Today, we're going to start off with part one of our running back rankings. And I think a lot of this is going to devolve basically because this is one of the more hotly contested seasons that I've seen the running back position be subjected to. A lot of things factor into that. One, the focus on NFL offenses to be more pass heavy. The also focus to maybe shift to a running back by committee. We're seeing a lot less workhorse running backs in the NFL right now. And also this is a season that has had, in recent memory, the fewest running backs with ADP in the first round. So a lot of value being pushed down the board. A lot of, running backs that are really open to interpretation, how they're going to be utilized by their teams this season. So I have never seen more varied takes by fantasy analysis, more a lack of consensus when it comes to how these running backs are ranked. So, this is going to be definitely a position that if you can nail these rankings, it's going to give you a certain edge within your draft and your fantasy leagues for 2023 season. So I'm going to go ahead and give you my personal rankings. And without further ado, let's dive into it. We're going to bring the same tier structure to the running backs as we did the wide receivers. And I think at the top, it's really clear who that tier one is. It's going to be Christian McCaffrey and Austin Ekeler. I know there's kind of a consensus on who's the 101, but you could find an argument for both Ekeler and CMC being the 101 in the running back class. But I personally lead Christian McCaffrey for a few different reasons. I don't view him wildly different than Austin Ekeler, but if you push come to shove, this is who I'm drafting. Currently, he is the running back one according to Sleeper, so we're in consensus on that, and his current draft position is the 102. I find that just a little rich, and I'll explain why in a bit. Last season, he finished as the RB2, averaging 18.5 fantasy points per game. Obviously, if you look at it, if you take out the first half of the season when he was still playing for the Panthers and only look at his production when he was with the 49ers, it was incredible, nearly 20 points per game. I think his utilization in this offense and Kyle Shanahan's focus on the running back position is going to be absolutely invaluable for Christian McCaffrey, and he's going to be a dynasty or fantasy football asset like we've never seen. Well, we have seen it before. It was Christian McCaffrey a few years ago before he had all the injuries. But even with the hype around him and his talent at the running back position and the utilization he's going to get with Kyle Shanahan's offense, I'm still not taking him at the 102. For me, I would probably be looking to take Christian McCaffrey if I'm at the 104 position and all of Chase, Jefferson, and Kupp have been drafted at this point. We still have to see what happens with Kupp and the severity of his injury that he from earlier this week in training camp. But if everything's all right, if it's not that severe, if he's ready for the start of the season in week one, I think I'm still taking Kupp just because of how I value high-end wide receivers and the disparity between the value of high-end wide receivers versus those mid-tier wide receivers. And I still think you can get a ton of value with the running back further down the board. But if all three of those high-end wide receivers are gone, I don't think Christian McCaffrey at the 104 is a bad value whatsoever. I mean, he's heavily utilized in the pass game as well, especially in half PPR and PPR formats. He's an absolute cheat code. You don't have to be the best pure runners in the class like a Derrick Henry or Nick Chubb. You just know that we can supplement a ton of those points with pass catching work. There's obviously been a ton of videos all over Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it nowadays, whereas saying running backs who get 1 point and it's this guy fighting for his life for 10 yards. And then you see a guy who catches a screen pass just to get tackled at the line of scrimmage. And it both produces the same point for your fantasy team. So obviously this is why we want to target guys with pass catching upside. And it's no mistake that Christian McCaffrey and Austin Ekeler are both two of the best, if not the two best pass catching running backs in the NFL. Even no matter who the quarterback is, we've seen Christian McCaffrey be quarterback agnostic, where he doesn't need massive impact by the quarterback to supplement his work, to really facilitate his offense. We know the 49ers have an incredible offensive line anchored by Trent Williams, and Christian McCaffrey running behind that offensive line is going to be truly, truly dominant for fantasy football. Also, we look at just kind of the split of the play calling that Kyle Shanahan has over the last course of the season. Obviously, we are going to anticipate that Brock Purdy is a starter for this season, and as long as Brock Purdy was a starter in 2022, he averaged only about 16 passes per game. So we see Kyle Shanahan call a lot of run plays, and that's going to really favor Christian McCaffrey as long as he can stay on the field and stay healthy. Moving on to the 102, or the running back 2 in this class is going to be Austin Ekeler. Currently, he is ranked as the RB2. Last season, he finished as the RB1, averaging 18.8 points. This is a guy that we've seen the Chargers come in and they drafted Joshua Kelly. They drafted Isaiah Spiller. They're continuing to try to replace him, but no one can replace Austin Ekeler. He just continues, even at his advanced age for a running back, he continues to put up production and be wildly successful for fantasy football. And I don't see that falling off anytime soon with the Los Angeles Chargers in 2023. His current ADP is 104. I get it, but I'm still taking Cooper Kupp over Austin Ekeler. My current ADP that I like him at is 105. Still taking him over Travis Kelce in that tier 1.5 of wide receivers in Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs, but still not as value as one of those top 3 wide receiver assets. I do think there's going to be a little bit less production as it comes to Austin Ekeler this season. He won't be as involved in the pass game. We saw a ton of the involvement in the pass game stemmed from both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen suffering from injuries for a very large portion of the 2022 season. Obviously, we're not going to bet on them getting injured again. While it's a likelihood that they do, I don't think it's going to be to the severity that it was last season, and we'll still see Keenan Allen and Mike Williams siphon off a little bit of that passing attack. Also, they drafted Quentin Johnston in the first round, second wide receiver gone in the draft. So, there's clearly a investment in Quentin Johnston to get him involved in the passing game. They also brought in Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator, and his specialty is getting the pass game involved. I know they really want to open up Justin Herbert and make him more aggressive with throwing the ball downfield, which should impact Austin Ekeler's check down ability and, his ability to make catches around the line of scrimmage. It's going to impact that a little bit more. I see the average depth of target for Justin Herbert increasing from his very conservative 7.9 yards to hopefully something closer to 10 yards. But I don't think it's going to cap his ceiling. I don't think he'll have the ceiling that he's had the past couple years. But, the floor with Austin Ekeler is still absolutely tremendous. Definitely worthy of a first round pick going in the top 5. So that's going to wrap up. Those are the 2 guys that I am very, very confident, taking them in the first round, taking them after those 3 wide receivers, and they definitely deserve to be there, and they're going to be just cornerstones for your fantasy team. Moving on to tier 2, there's going to be 4 guys in tier 2, and that's going to start off with a rookie, Bijan Robinson. Absolute freak of a player coming out of the University of Texas. Obviously, we don't have any stats on him last year because he played in college last year, so he doesn't really have a fantasy rank, but we can look at what his current value is. According to Sleeper, he's the RB4. I disagree slightly. I think he's a little bit more valuable than that, and his current draft position is the 108. I don't know how to feel about that. I don't think it's unfair to take him at the 108 or take him at the end of the first round. I think it's still a good value, but just me personally, I've been trying to target wide receivers. Just my strategy, going after an AJ Brown, a CD Lamb, a Stephon Diggs, kind of in that area. And not to say that Bijan Robinson is the wrong person to pick at the 108 or the 109 or the 110. I'm just saying when it comes to draft strategy, my strategy is to go wide receiver there, despite the valuation of what I have at running backs. But he's still my running back 3. If I'm seeing all 3 of those wide receivers off the board, I'm certainly not opposed to taking Bijan Robinson at the end of the first round. We look at guys, at rookie running backs, you want to analyze their situation because there's not much production that we can analyze in the previous year. So a lot of this is projection. But thankfully, Bijan Robinson, we saw, was one of the highest graded running backs coming out of college since Saquon Barkley. We had a lot of reports from NFL teams wanting to use him as more than just a running back. They saw him as, this flex back option, lining him up in the slot. He did line up in the slot to catch passes at University of Texas. So, we see that hopefully the Falcons are going to use him in that role as well. And why I'm so confident ranking him high despite, no NFL experience is the fact that the Falcons are a good team when it comes to running the football. We saw two incredible running backs last year produce for them. Tyler Algier as a rookie had over 1,000 yards, and Cordero Patterson as a very much aging veteran was pretty productive for the Falcons as well. Not to mention Caleb Huntley as the third back in that rotation also had some pretty productive games as well. The offensive line for the Falcons is sneaky good and should provide a lot of opportunity for Bijan Robinson. We look at Naji Harris and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just drafting a running back in and of itself isn't going to fix your run game. You still have a massive impact from the offensive line. So when you look at these rookie running backs, you want to see them go to situations where you've seen running backs be successful. We've seen that with Cordero Patterson. We've seen that with Tyler Algier. We've seen Arthur Smith's scheme that favors running backs and puts them in a position to succeed. And with Bijan Robinson's just absolute insane talent, I can see him being incredibly valuable for fantasy this year. And I'm happy with him in the first round. Moving on to the running back 4, maybe a little bit of a hot take here, but I'm going to go with Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is my running back 4. Sleeper currently has him valued as the running back 6. So I'm a little bit higher on Nick Chubb than Sleeper. But last year he finished as the running back 5, averaging 15.8 points per game. And I just think that despite some of the negative connotation, the negative press that's coming out around the Cleveland Browns at the current moment, Nick Chubb has been that one stalwart of that team, has been a guy that is going to get it done for fantasy football, and is just too talented to fail. I mean, you look at these guys where you try to evaluate position, you try to evaluate certain aspects that are going to influence the game, but there are certain people that no matter where they go, no matter what situation they are in, they are too talented to fail, and that's how I kind of view Nick Chubb. He is really the best pure runner of the football, and he doesn't have that pass-catching upside that an Ekeler or CMC does, but when it comes to, nose down, running the football, breaking tackles, finding a nose for the end zone, Nick Chubb is the best pure runner in this class. Obviously, they haven't really made an investment to take away carries from him. Obviously, they have not re-signed Kareem Hunt at this point. So we'll see, some of that work. We're not going to see him be a 3-down back, but even some of the work that Kareem Hunt was getting as a change of pace back, I think they're going to really get Nick Chubb involved. They have made an effort. Not that I'm going to buy into the coach speak. They said they want to get him involved in the pass game, and he doesn't have the worst hands in the world. When he's been called upon to be in the pass game, he's made catches. I'm not going to rely on him to be a pass catching back. I really, really care about Nick Chubb for that first and second down work, and I get it. A huge sleeper this season, especially in Dynasty, is Jerome Ford. People are going out and talking about, go get Jerome Ford. A lot of hype coming out of him in training camp. The team seems to love him. Let's look at his 2022 stats. In 2022, he had 8 attempts for 12 yards, averaging 1.5 yards per carry. That does not terrify me at all. I don't think the hype is really, this is the coach speak that we're trying to see through. we look at the production last year, and it's very clear he is not a threat to Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, just with the way this team is designed, Deshaun Watson, while he is a mobile threat, he's not a rushing quarterback. I think there's a very different distinction. He's not going to be the guy that goes out and tries to rush for touchdowns. They'll still be utilizing heavily on Nick Chubb for when they get into that, red zone 5 yards in for those goal line touches. And I just think the absolute consistent workload that Nick Chubb will receive, and just, despite being 27, his ability to run the football is going to continue to lead him to fantasy success. Moving on to my running back 5, another guy that I'm higher on consensus with, and I think that's kind of absolutely dirty what the fantasy community is doing to Derrick Henry at this current moment. Because right now, he is my running back 5, but Sleeper has him as a running back 8 going in the middle of the second round at 205. How? Last year, he finished as the running back 4, averaging 17.9 points per game. That is insane. And there's nothing that this offense have done or that this team has done to indicate that Derrick Henry's usage is going to be any different than what it's been the past couple years. And what has been the past couple years? a guy that is a top 2 running back in the NFL went on the field. Obviously, we have to take out 2 years ago when he got injured and missed the second half of the season, but he came back last year and demonstrated that he is still that dude. Yes, the age may scare some people away being 29, but we have to remember that he sat behind DeMarco Murray for a couple years, so the actual mileage on Derrick Henry as a running back is not as much as we see a normal 29-year-old running back. He wasn't really worn down right out of the gates, so I think he still has some tread on the tires to go through. And, they brought in DeAndre Hopkins, but I'm not really high on DeAndre Hopkins. He's aging. He has trouble staying on the field with injury history, and we haven't seen too much production come from any of the wide receivers out in Tennessee since A.J. Brown left. So I still think this is an offense that Vrabel really wants to run through Derrick Henry, and this is a guy, if he's going to continue to average this many points per game, taking him in the early second round, this is the first running back that I feel is a screaming value. Those really top, my tier 2 wide receivers in A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, CeeDee Lamb, and basically those 3 guys, if they are all gone at the top of the second round, you need to be targeting Derrick Henry. Also, fun fact, during the playoffs, weeks 15 through 17, he plays the Houston Texans twice. And what is Derrick Henry's track record versus the Houston Texans? I believe in the past 5 times he played the Houston Texans, he's hit over 200 yards 4 times. He will win you championships. I know it's a very long-term approach, but even still, just the way Derrick Henry, he's just built different. There's not many running backs that are 6'3", 250 and are going to have, that full workhorse workload that Derrick Henry has. Moving on to round out tier 2 is going to be Saquon Barkley, a guy that I had a little bit lower, but now that he has signed a deal, there was a franchise tag drama, but he signed the deal. He's now on the team. He's going to be playing this year, and that's obviously good to see. So there's no concerns about him holding out. And, Saquon Barkley, I'm a little bit lower on him than consensus, so he's my running back 6. I'd rather have Chubb and Henry over him. At his current ADP, he's at the 109, right around the Bijan Robinson area. I obviously rather have Bijan. But Sleeper has him ranked as the running back 3. Last year, he finished as the running back 6, averaging 16 points per game. Obviously, that was helped out by a very, very hot start to the season. He kind of cooled off towards the end of the season. That doesn't, lend any less credibility to his talent. He's still an incredibly talented running back. But as we see this offense evolve, this is a team that's put a lot of effort, and, they've spoken with their money, and the money is going to Daniel Jones. Brian Daboll is a guy that really favors the pass game. And I think, last season, despite, how good Daniel Jones was running the ball, despite how good Saquon Barkley was in the pass game, running the ball as well, how efficient he was with the touches that he received, I think that was kind of an outlier season for the New York Giants. I'm not ready to buy into the New York Giants production. I don't think they win as many games as they do last year. They won more one-score games than the NFL average would predict, and I do believe there's going to be some regression towards the mean. They're also in one of the worst divisions in the NFL, with strong defenses going up against the Commanders, Eagles, and the Cowboys twice a season. So I just think that the offense as a whole is going to regress. Obviously, there's a little bit of rookie luck with Brian Daboll as a rookie head coach. You come in, he introduced some new schemes. He introduced some new play calls. Now in the offseason, you'll have a lot of teams have time to study, analyze it, try to bring up some counters. Obviously, we haven't seen Saquon be healthy for a full season. This is the first time we've seen Saquon be healthy and active for a full season. So, now there's a lot more people planning on, game scripting against Saquon, especially with the lack of wide receiver talent there. So all this just goes to say, I do anticipate regression offensively as a whole for the New York Giants, and that's obviously going to deteriorate the production for Saquon Barkley. They do have a sneaky good offensive line, though, and we do know an offensive line does translate well to running production. Obviously, Andrew Thomas coming in, making his name as an elite offensive tackle, anchoring that line. But Daniel Jones is a sneaky good rusher, and he does vulture a lot of the goal line work. Instead of handing it off to Saquon Barkley, they use him as a distraction, play fake. Daniel Jones runs it in. We saw that in the championship week 17 last year where Daniel Jones finished with like 30 points and Saquon finished with like 4 points because he didn't get any of the touchdowns, and 2 rushing touchdowns went to Daniel Jones. So with the overall regression, with the threat of Daniel Jones being a rushing quarterback, I just don't see Saquon being a value in the first round for fantasy. All right, now I just want to take a quick pause to talk about why I'm so infatuated with the draft strategy of taking wide receivers early on in your fantasy football drafts. We've already gone through 6 players, and we have already exhausted tier 2 of the running back talent. When we look at our wide receivers, it took us all the way down to wide receiver 11 in Jalen Waddle before we exhausted our tier 2 of wide receiver talent. And then we go into our tier 3. The tier 3 was much shorter for the wide receivers, only had about 4 players. Tier 3 for the running backs is going to be my running back 7 through my running back 15. And also the tier 3 of wide receivers, you have to get that tier 3 level talent in the second and in the third round. You can get tier 3 running back talent in the 4th round, in the 5th round, even in the 6th round at times. So if you're comparing, tier-based talent, you can get commensurate value at the running back position way further down the draft board, which is why I'm okay passing on some of those top tier running backs. But without further ado, let's jump into tier 3, Naji Harris, number 7. And I think there's a discussion around Naji that a lot of people aren't paying attention to. And, we don't need to talk about all the statistics. And sometimes it just does get me a little hot and bothered that people want to, reach for these wild statistics that don't necessarily translate to on-field production. We got to just look at things at face value. So Naji Harris last year finished as the RB14, little disappointing. He's currently ranked as the RB12 in Sleeper, just a fringe running back 1. I have him ranked as my running back 7, so I'm a lot higher on him. Current ADP in the 3rd round at the 306. That's a value. If, DK Metcalf, I guess after DK Metcalf, if he's not available in the 3rd round and Naji is kind of in the middle of that 3rd round, Naji is a screaming value to me. Last season, he averaged 11.9 fantasy points per game. But what we are forgetting is that through the first 9 games of the season, Naji Harris was playing with a metal plate in his foot. He had a Liz Frank injury in preseason that severely hampered his production on the field. After week 10, Naji Harris was the running back 6 on this season. Also, we've seen a massive upgrade in the offensive line with the Steelers this offseason, signing Isaac Seumalo at guard, going out and getting Broderick Jones in the draft. Everything points to Naji Harris just absolutely skyrocketing in value and production. If he stays healthy, he's going to be a top 10 running back. Do not overthink this one. I really don't have that much to say. Just, it's a value. Don't read too much into the injury aspect of last season. And honestly, I'm going to go out and say, I like the mentality that he didn't just take off the first half of the season to recover. He wanted to play through it. He wants to fight there for his team. And we've seen him be a guy that, when the mentality of the running back doing the dirty work, he's the guy that does the dirty work. And he is one of the last true 3-down workhorse backs in the NFL. Mike Tomlin is one of the old heads in the NFL that still continues that approach. And then just the sheer volume with Naji Harris will catapult him up to potentially a top 5 finish. That's why I have him as my number 7 running back and a screaming value in the 3rd round. Moving on to from one hot take to an even hotter take, my running back 8 is going to be Miles Sanders for the Carolina Panthers. Tremendous value because right now he's in my top 10 running backs, but Sleeper ADP has him as the running back 20 in this class. That is stupid. He also is being drafted in the 5th round. Way too low. I'm taking him in most rounds, and not maybe at the early 4th, but if I'm at the mid to end of the 4th round, I'm happy to reach on Miles Sanders because my projections for him are going to be absolutely incredible for fantasy football. Last year, he finished as the RB13, averaging 12.2 fantasy points per game. And obviously, he was running behind an elite offensive line. But we saw a lot of his touchdown upside get vultured by Jalen Hurts. When you got to the goal line, Jalen Hurts is the one diving the ball into the end zone, not Miles Sanders. And also you had a lot of mouths to feed in that Philadelphia Eagles offense, like Dallas Goedert, Vonta Smith, A.J. Brown. So we saw good games from Miles and bad games from Miles. But, on those good games, we saw flashes of brilliance, which is what you want to see from a running back. Also, Miles Sanders did get the most expensive free agency contract for a running back. And if we're going to follow the money, which we like to do on this channel, it indicates that he is one of the more valuable backs in the NFL if a team is willing to give him that much money over the course of 3 years. And we look at the situation he's in. He's in a great situation. The Carolina Panthers, for the first time in probably 10 years, don't have any issues on the offensive line. They nailed their draft picks the past past few years and have a sneaky good offensive line ranking top 10 in PFF grade. Also, we've seen Miles Sanders be incredibly efficient as a pass catcher. In his rookie season with the Eagles, he caught 53 out of 60 passes, and we've even seen video footage of Miles Sanders talking to Frank Reich and the GM of the Carolina Panthers saying, I want to be involved in passing work. Now, we've always been on the narrative of tight ends are a running back's or a rookie quarterback's best friend as a safety blanket. But guess what? Miles Sanders, with his aptitude in the passing game, will also be a great safety blanket for Bryce Young. And Bryce Young seemed to really help out a pass catching running back last year at Alabama named Jahmyr Gibbs. He did pretty well for himself, so I think he will be certainly competent in feeding the ball to Miles Sanders. Maybe not some concerns around Bryce Young as an NFL quarterback, but the concerns in accurate passing and short to intermediate throws, he is one of the best to ever do it out of the college football ranks, and that's what you're going to need to supply a pass catching role for Miles Sanders. That plus running behind a great offensive line. Miles Sanders is a must draft at his current ADP for me. Moving on to running back 9. I know he's really low comparatively. Sleeper currently has him as wide receiver or running back 7. I have him as running back 9. Currently, his ADP is towards the middle to end second round at 208. And last year, he was tremendous for fantasy football. Josh Jacobs was. He was a running back 3, averaging 17.8 points per game. But there is a lot of uncertainty around the Raiders right now. There is a potential for Josh Jacobs to hold out. If he had signed his franchise tag or if he had signed a long-term deal, he's obviously much higher in my rankings. But given the uncertainty of whether he's going to play, the fact that he's not practicing with the team right now, I don't know if I can waste a second-round pick on a guy that may hold out or hold in or whatever you want to call it until he gets a new contract. Obviously, there's a lot of controversy surrounding the running back position and their compensation at the NFL level. We're going to talk about a few other guys later on, Jonathan Taylor, who are also bumped down in my rankings due to some of this off-field issues, not off-field issues in the way of Alvin Kamara or Deshaun Watson, but just the fact that they're going to be holding out for contract and monetary reasons. So there is a chance that Josh Jacobs does not suit up for the Raiders in week 1. And if you're wasting a second-round pick, not wasting, but if you're utilizing a second-round pick on a guy that's not playing week 1, that's kind of a fantasy faux pas. I would much rather take guys that I know are going to come out, know are going to be productive, maybe don't have the upside of Josh Jacobs, but certainly will be available and scoring you fantasy points because you don't score fantasy points from the couch. But I do think Josh Jacobs as a whole, we haven't seen historically a wide receiver or running back 1. I don't know why I keep saying wide receiver. I greatly apologize for that. But historically, we have not seen a running back 1 or running back put up back-to-back running back 1 seasons. And Josh Jacobs obviously was on track to do that. In certain formats, he was the running back 1. But we haven't seen the running back be able to repeat that. And that obviously comes from several factors, least of which is the offensive line play. And we know that the Raiders have one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. I do think there's also a slight downgrade at the quarterback position going from Derek Carr to Jimmy Garoppolo. So the offense as a whole is going to be, the offense efficiency as a whole will be reduced with him under center. So with the offensive line concerns, with the offensive efficiency concerns, with the off-field monetary concerns, it's enough for me to kind of pass on Josh Jacobs at his current ADP. I also want to highlight that Josh Jacobs, with his 4 years in the NFL, this was the first year that he actually returned on ADP. He was kind of viewed as a disappointment through his first 3 years in the NFL. This was the first year where he kind of put it all together from a pass catching standpoint, from a running back standpoint, from a nose into the end zone kind of standpoint. So if you're going to bet on him being a running back 1, he's only done it 1 out of 4 years, I'm not sure I'm willing to make that bet. I'm not sure I'm going to make a bet on him repeating an outlier season. So with all those concerns, it's hard for me to say this, but Josh Jacobs falls to my running back 9. And as a current ADP, I will be avoiding him. Moving on to my running back 10, and that's going to be Tony Pollard for the Dallas Cowboys. And I love Tony Pollard and the talent, but there are certain things that, we have to do a little bit of projections, and a lot of my rankings are based on what I project to happen between now and the start of the season in early September. But let's go over some stats first real quick with Tony Pollard. Currently ranked as a running back 9. I have him as a 10, so, fairly consensus there. His ADP is at the end of the second round at the 211 or 212 based on whatever rankings you're looking at. Last year he finished as the RB7 averaging 14.3 fantasy points per game, which is really, really impressive considering that Zeke was still on the team. If Tony Pollard is truly ready to step up into that workhorse role, if the Cowboys do not add another running back between now and the start of the season, I could certainly see Tony Pollard finishing as a top 6 running back. I mean, he is talented. I don't anticipate the broken bone from last year. I mean, it's a very quick turnaround time. He's not on the PUP list to start camp. He's been practicing well. The injury does not concern me. I'm not worried about the injury whatsoever when it comes to Tony Pollard. But what I do have a concern about is when the first game, when Zeke was out, Tony Pollard got 20 opportunities, and he came over to the sideline saying, "I'm out of breath. I can't do this. I'm exhausted. I can't keep up this workload." And that kind of scares me if he's going to run out of gas. He's never been asked to be in that, true workhorse role. He's never been asked to take 250 to 300 touches out of the backfield. And I think that's what a lot of people are projecting him to be right now. But I just don't see that being a physical possibility for Tony Pollard. He's great as a change of pace back. He's great as a guy that gets 12 to 14 opportunities per game, but he's not going to get close to 20 opportunities per game. That's just going to completely destroy him physically, not mentally, but physically will wear him down just because he's not used to that sort of production. Also, I am projecting that the Cowboys will sign someone, whether they bring back Ezekiel Elliott, whether they go out and try to bring in Leonard Fournette. Kareem Hunt is even a guy that's been linked to them a little bit. I don't think they want to start the offseason, or don't think they want to start the regular season only having Tony Pollard followed by Malik Davis, Ronald Jones, and Deuce Vaughn on the depth chart. So I could really see Ronald Jones being cut and being replaced by a guy that they sign. That's going to take a lot of work away from Tony Pollard. So that's based on my projection and, the fact that he's not going to be a true workhorse, that I think there's going to be some sort of committee aspect going on with Schottenheimer taking over offensive play calling duties in Dallas. I think Tony Pollard does have the opportunity to repeat something close to last year. Maybe a wide receiver 9, running back 9, running back 10. I really got wide receivers on the brain right now. Wow. Kind of around like that borderline RB1. I just don't see the upside of him breaking into that top 6, top 7 era like, a Miles Sanders could. So right now we're going to go through one more. I know 10 would be a clean number to cap it off at, but we're going to do one more. I want to get through 11. That way, it's a little bit more even because I'm going to talk about some honorable mentions in part 2. So let's just jump into one more. I did 11 on the wide receiver one. Let's do 11 on the running back one. Sounds fun to me. Come on, guys. Breece Hall, running back for the Jets. Got a lot to talk about, but I'll try to keep it kind of brief. Right now, he's my running back 11. Sleeper has him as consensus running back 10. Don't necessarily disagree. We're not too far off consensus with that. His current draft position is at the top of the 3rd round. A little high, especially given that I don't think he's going to be wildly productive for the first 4 seasons of the game. He finished as the running back 42. That's because he left early last season with that ACL injury, which we'll talk about a little bit. But even only playing 5 games with it and still finishing as the running back 42, that's incredible because he still averaged over 15 points per game, averaged 15.1 points per game, which is certainly an elite metric for Breece Hall. Now, when you draft Breece Hall, you have to be anticipatory of a guy that's not going to be wildly productive off the start of the bat. The first 4 games might be slow. We saw Michael Carter is still there, an effective running back. Zonovan Knight could still be rotated in. We saw the regime in New York go out and draft Izzy Abanikanda in the 4th round. Pretty significant capital nowadays if we look at the running back, the way running backs are taken in the draft. And I think they want to rotate him in to hopefully lighten the load for Breece Hall as he continues to work back from that ACL injury. Again, it's going to be a slow start to the season. And for you savvy players, when it comes to fantasy football, you'll know that it's going to be a rough start to the season, but you really are bringing him in for, weeks 5 or week 6 through week 17 and really making a push for the fantasy championship. If you're in a home league and you're playing with some less savvy players who do just take him at the top of the 3rd round, see if you can try to trade for him after the first 2 games or after the 3rd or 4th game where he's a little bit of a disappointment. But with that being said, it's going to take a little bit of ramp up period, but I do love the opportunity for Breece Hall. Again, incredibly efficient when it came to his running back touches last year. One of the most efficient running backs. I think he averaged close to 5 yards per carry. And also, we've seen this as a regime that is going to really favor the running back and wants to get the running back involved. Robert Saleh does come from the Kyle Shanahan tree, and we've seen, what that offensive that offensive structure looks like when it comes to involving the running backs. And I know, it's not apples to apples or roses to roses because they brought in Nathaniel Hackett. I do have some concerns around Daniel Hackett. I do have some concerns around Aaron Rodgers. I mean, if we want to talk objectively about Aaron Rodgers, he is an older quarterback approaching 40, and I do realize that he is coming off of back-to-back MVPs just 1 year removed from that. However, with quarterbacks, when we see them lose it, they lose it quickly, and when they fall off that cliff, it's steep and dramatic. And I think, last season we saw a very steep fall off for Aaron Rodgers. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to reclaim that MVP caliber form. I think he'll be struggling. Again, they're in a very, very tough division in the AFC, not let alone the AFC East, going up against the Dolphins, the Patriots, and the Bills twice a season. So those are just a few of the concerns I have around Breece Hall. I would personally, it's a little rich for my blood taking him at the start of the top of the third round. I personally believe it's important to get off to a very strong start in fantasy. You never want to be playing catch up. You never want to be that guy that has to trade or feel like you have to win your last 3 games. Putting yourself in a good position early on in the season is the way to win fantasy, in my opinion. It sets you up well for making trades, being able to acquire players, being able not to worry down the stretch and prepare your roster for fantasy playoff mode. So with that being said, he's not really conducive to that strategy of a strong start. So definitely a guy that I'm not drafting as current ADP, but I will be targeting at the trade deadline after a few bad games or half a season of disappointment. So that's going to wrap up top 3. We are about halfway through our tier 3. It's the same way I did with the wide receivers. I'm not going to post the full rankings on Twitter or X or whatever it's called. Now, as soon as that second video posts next Tuesday, I will go ahead to Twitter and give you a full breakdown of all my top 20 running backs in order and the tiers that they belong in if you are very keen on tier-based drafting. But I hope you enjoyed the first 11. Some very notable names that were left out of the top 11, so it should be a very fun conversation when we get into part 2 next week. But until then, guys, take care.